Hello and welcome back to Why This Film, the podcast where we reach back into your childhood, pluck out a movie, give it a rewatch and have a chat about it. I'm Emily Slade and welcome back.
You watched it so many times before and now you're gonna watch it again. But it's been so many years since you last saw it and now you show it to your friends and they're like, what?
What am I watching?
Why this film?
And I'm joined today by Hannah. Hello!
Hello, Emily.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is where I'm very excited. I've never done a podcast before.
Oh, amazing! Well, I'm so happy to introduce you to the wonderful world. And I'm very excited because your chosen movie is 1989's Uncle Buck, the IMDb breakdown. Bachelor and all-round slob Buck babysits his brother's rebellious teen daughter and her cute younger brother and sister. So, why this film?
Do you know, you asked for films from my childhood, and this was just one that sprung to my mind instantly. Big John Hughes fan, and I just remember being young and seeing, I think there must be my parents' influence, obviously, lots of John Candy films. So I love this one. I love Great Outdoors. I love Planes, Trains and Automobiles.
Nice.
Is it Spaceballs or Space something?
Yeah.
I just love John Candy. This film cracks me up. It's so funny. And watching it again as an adult is very different to when you were a child.
Yeah, I can imagine. I never really watched this as a child. I think it was on TV once when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I think I just watched it because I was like, oh, John Hughes, I should probably tick that off. And I did remember there were a couple moments in it that stayed with me for the rest of my life. So I was really interested to go back to it because obviously John Hughes is iconic.
Yeah.
And I was so prepared to have my heart warmed. I sat down and I was like, okay, so in an hour and a half's time, my heart is going to be thoroughly warmed. And it's a really, really interesting one. It's such a great concept.
Yes.
And I really did enjoy it. And it is genuinely funny and it's quite harmless in everything that it does. So the IMDb breakdown where it's rebellious teenage daughter. When I started watching the movie, I was like, yo, you all need to back up. This girl is not rebellious. She's calling her parents out quite validly on some shitty behavior. But then as soon as Buck arrives, she does start being a massive bitch. And
Isn't she so silly?
God, she's so horrible. She's actively horrible.
Yeah.
And Uncle Buck is so lovable that you're like, she is the villain of this piece.
Yes, she is.
Our protagonist is the most hated. And then you've got the sort of they're not Brat Pack, but they're iconic child actors of Gabby Hoffman and Macaulay Culkin. You're safe with those two, and they're just adorable in this. You can totally see why they had careers as children, and they're very, very funny and very sweet. So it really is the relationship between the eldest teenage daughter and Buck. So when you watched this as a kid, were you affiliating yourself with, is her name Tia?
I don't think so. I think I remember not really. I think as an adult I saw her storyline very different. You see the bit in the bowling alley with the guy kind of hitting on her and she's so strong and tough and just I'm not interested, back off sort of thing. And then she goes to that house party and she's really vulnerable with her boyfriend, Bug, isn't it?
Bug, yeah.
And you realise actually she's being, as an adult, you realise she's being pressured into having sex and she's really uncomfortable and she doesn't want to be here. I don't think as a child I clicked onto any of that. I think as a child I was like, oh, she's so horrible. She's being so horrible to Uncle Buck. Yeah. I was very much on team Macaulay Culkin and Gabby Hoffman. I can't remember their names.
Yeah, definitely. Miles and Maisie.
Miles and Maisie, that's right. Yeah, I was definitely probably around that age when I watched it.
Right.
I was born in '88, so I didn't watch it when it first came out. But yeah, I was around that age the first time I watched it, so I was definitely on their team of just finding Uncle Buck amazing and fun. And when he makes that giant pancake and all those things as a kid, I absolutely loved.
Yeah, it's true John Hughes magic. Like,
isn't it?
Buck
Absolutely.
is such an interesting character, where he's that classic, established as this like gambling, cheating, layabout bozo, and then the second he's confronted with a 9-year-old, he's like, I will die for you.
Yes.
And he's so wonderful. And like, you're right, as an adult, as a child, I remember things like when he's like, I have a mate in the police who can tell whether your toothbrush has just been run under the tap or whether you've actually brushed your teeth. And Gabby Hoffman's like, guess we're gonna have to actually start brushing your teeth. As a child, I was like, oh, I relate. But as an adult, you're like, that's adorable. And the main sort of theme of the movie is this idea that Tia, the teenager, feels like she has no relationship with her parents. She's very scathing of them. They clearly don't have time for their children. They've moved to a new house because of their jobs, and they're not keeping up to date with any of their children's activities or interests, and they've not considered them in any choices and decisions that have been happening. And then Uncle Buck comes and is the complete opposite, in that he's incredibly overbearing and protective of her and knows what she's up to almost 24/7, which of course she initially rejects, but then obviously she learns that actually all she ever wanted was someone who cared about her in that way, and they form a wonderful relationship. It's very, very near the end. Like, I had like 20 minutes left of the movie, and I was like, fucking hell, like Tia needs to fucking change her attitude, because we've got 20 minutes till the credits and they're still not friends. Like, what's gonna have to happen? Like, something incredibly drastic is gonna have to happen. And actually, it's not really that drastic. The thing that is the catalyst,
what does he do? It was slightly drastic. He gags her boyfriend and puts him in the boot of his car.
This is the
then
thing,
shoots golf balls at it.
The event is that sort of the boyfriend breaks up with her, or it's implied that he cheats on her with this other woman. But Uncle Buck's reaction to that is to kidnap and drill.
He acts out of the car, doesn't he? We'll bury the hatchet.
So good. It's so good. He's so funny. And I think it's, again, classic John Hughes, it's really difficult because people were like, does it hold up? Is it really dated? Is it really dated? And I was like, it's not dated. It's dated in that, like, you get the hijinks from the fact that Buck's girlfriend rings the landline, and Tia and manages to like lie to her. That wouldn't happen today because everybody has mobile phones. But it's actually quite harmless and charming with everything else. I guess if you had to sort of say something negative about it, it's the sort of the silly teenager that doesn't know anything, and she's got this awful boyfriend and blah blah blah, and it's quite basic. That classic.
That's John Hughes, isn't it? He writes these slightly complex teenagers. That's like
And when you hear that Tia was meant to originally be played by Winona Ryder, like, you can totally see that.
And I was reading Uncle Buck. There was at one point Jack Nicholson was going to be Uncle Buck.
Can you imagine how bizarre would that be?
That would have been like psychotic Uncle Buck.
Exactly, like John Candy raising an axe from his boot and threatening your boyfriend is one thing. Jack Nicholson doing it, you're like, I actually fear for my life. Jim Carrey as well, like, he's sort of too wiry and ecstatic. I wouldn't buy that he's this sort of bozo character with Jim Carrey. He's not slobbily enough. Do you know what I mean?
And I'm just on IMDb now. Danny DeVito and Tom Cruise, no chance.
Tom Cruise?
What was he, like 15 in 1989? No way.
Literally, that's very bizarre. I honestly can't see anyone but John Candy. He's got that brilliant line that he walks of being like annoying and lovable.
Yeah, 100%.
and he does it so well. One of the more famous scenes from this movie is when Macaulay Culkin first meets him in the kitchen, and they have a little interrogation
Questions.
scene. It's so funny, and like it really does show both of them to be the like comedic stars that they were. And this movie's full of that. It's full of these lovely little comedy moments, and there was nothing about it sitting here in 2021 that I was like, ooh, about. Like there really wasn't. It was all quite fine. Which I
real family. There are moments that as a child go over your head. Well, I rewatched it, and it's the bit with he's just got into the house and he's trying to work the washing machine, and the neighbour comes over, to not knowing that the parents are out of town, to call on the mum to go for lunch, and he's in the laundry room banging this washing machine because he can't get it open, and he's shouting, "I'm going to put my load in you whether you like it or not," and it's like laden with sexual innuendo as he's like smashing rhythmically against the machine, and this woman outside is, "Oh my gosh, she's being attacked, oh my gosh, oh my gosh." As a child, no concept of what's going on there at all, but as an adult I was in hysterics, like hilarious.
It's very mature considering it's like what, a PG? Oh no, it's a 12.
Is it?
According to IMDb, but I'm not sure because surely this is for kids, but sometimes then you're right, like
on TV in the middle of the day.
Yeah, exactly. But there's so many moments. That definitely was one, I imagine, and like that's quite a lovely bit that like it would just go over the heads of children, and they'd be like, haha, the neighbor's worried because there's a stranger in the house. When as an adult you're like, oh. And what I loved about it was how quickly it gets resolved.
Like, so quick.
I hate when these things drag on. And she's like, "Who are you talking dirty to?" And he was like, "The washing machine." She's a bit of a stereotype character. Like again, John Hughes tends to fall back on certain archetypes to tell storylines that involve less stereotypical characters, so it's kind of okay. But she was the classic sort of like lonely divorced neighbor who is just after a man, and she causes the tension between Buck and his girlfriend, which was a little tiresome, but then it paid off so well in the end when they get back together and Buck is like willing to settle down, although I don't know if I'd believe that a week looking after his nieces and nephews would change him that drastically.
I think some women spend 30 or 40 years trying to change a man. I think a week is unrealistic, perhaps.
Yeah, a little bit. So that was really interesting. He's a funny character, and like on IMDb it suggests Uncle Buck, like a 1930s TV program about a bit darker, about a man who becomes the carer to his nieces and nephews after their parents die in a car crash, and it was like a TV show, and it looks just sort of like your classic sitcom. So I wonder if that was inspiration for this movie. It's not written anywhere that it was, but it's impossible to separate.
Sort of similar sort of storyline, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, it is bizarre. And I mean, the opening to this movie as well is a conversation about like, you said shit twice. Oh, get out of my face. Shut up. And it's like very, very realistic conversation that siblings have. I don't know if it was an attempt to be sort of anti that
picket fence kind of perfect family.
Yeah, the perfect family kind of thing. But it hits you right in the face with that sort of attitude that sort of continues throughout the movie. It's really funny because the whole character of Buck is that he's not actually a bad guy, and that's sort of the joke. Like the way he like gets rid of the drunk clown.
Oh my gosh, that, you know what I was thinking about, but I've got to mention the drunk clown when he punches him in the face and he springs back up again.
There's a few moments in this movie that have a real bizarre slapstick element to them, but like almost cartoonish. The clown is one where he's established that he's got this like nose, and he like punches him, and he springs back up like a sort of punching bag. And there's another moment where John Candy himself gets booted through the door, and he like flies back to this sort of dramatic music and crashes to the floor, like very like unrealistic moments of film within this otherwise quite realistically filmed thing. So really odd choices there.
I was thinking about the washing machine bit, again, like noticing things I wouldn't have done when I watched it before. When he comes out of that room, there's a very cartoon kind of whoosh noise as he like comes around the door, like a like it's non-diegetic, and it's completely out of the realm of normality. It's like you say, very cartoonish slapstick.
Yeah, it's really strange, and I wonder, because it's not constant, it's just every now and then that they make these choices, and it's quite episodic as well, the movie. It's sort of, today's Macaulay Culkin's birthday, and today is the day that Tia's going to a party, and like there's just sort of the continuous storyline is really the overarching themes of the relationship between Uncle Buck and the children, but it's done through such episodic moments just to sort of prove that Uncle Buck is a good guy. Like I loved when he went into Maisie's school, and we got the idea that she goes to this sort of incredibly uptight, bizarre school where this cranky old woman is like, Maisie Russell is a dreamer, and he's like, she's 6, and she's like, we gotta stamp him out young, and then he like has a go at this woman. But before that, we got like a 5-minute segment of him realizing that he's smoking a cigar in the corridors, goes into the toilets to try and put it out, sees the urinals and how small they are, and then like attempts to have a piss.
Down.
And it's just like a really bizarre bit of like physical comedy where I'm like, why is this happening?
What does he say when he gets in there? I was absolutely howling. She's got a giant wart on her face, hasn't she? And he says something like, hi, I'm Buck Melanoma, nice to meet you, wart. Ridiculous. Like Austin Powers when he does it's like straight out of that
full on Austin Powers moment. And then right at the end he's like, here's a quarter, go downtown and get a rat to gnaw that thing off your face. It's like fucking hell.
Maybe that makes it a bit dated, because I don't know if one can mock one's mole anymore.
It's that, and the sort of I mean, the whole way Buck handles the situation with the boyfriend, I usually find it quite tiresome whenever it's like, hey, teenage girl, don't wear that skirt so short. You men are, he literally says, he's like, you can't trust that boyfriend because all he wants is one thing. I should know because that used to be me. And I really hate that trope, because it goes back into that sort of like, hey, how about we teach men not to rape rather than women to cover themselves up? But like, it's very generalized, and it's very sort of like, well, we shouldn't just accept that boys are shitty. Like, we should be teaching them to be better. That's possibly quite a woke thing to come into the film industry with, because it's so much easier to just be like, you can't wear that. Don't go out with him. And obviously he is a dick by the end of the movie. But a dick that is quite funnily very frightened, and
very frightened of Uncle Buck.
Reasonably so, because when he's threatening him with the hatchet, he's just like a little bit wary. And then when he drills into the room,
come and have a look at it, I want to show you. And the boyfriend,
come closer.
I'll go inside.
And then he literally gags and bounds him and throws him in the trunk of his car, which is
And that's what him and Tia end up bonding over, because I remember
Yeah.
in the back of the car he's telling her, she's in the car and he's telling her what happened, and she's just laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
All the things he's done to this boy that a couple of days ago she would have died for.
Yeah.
And she's laughing so hard at the fact that Buck has launched golf balls at him and threatened him with an axe, and that's a very dad move, I feel.
A very dad move. And like, yeah, it's interesting because the people that needed to learn this lesson were the parents, but they're absent for the entire movie. But then it's sort of understandable because, you know, they're adults, they're busy, and they realize the error of their ways. And it actually has a really sweet payoff. And as an adult, I think it hit me a lot more than if I had been a child, when the parents return home and the mom, who'd had this whole argument with Tia, so sick of her attitude, like her father's just had a heart attack, and Tia is like, I'd have a heart attack too if you moved away from me.
I did say that. Ooh.
Really horrible things. And she walks back into the house after however long she'd been away, and Tia's just standing in the hallway, and she goes up to her and like hugs her, and the mum's face is just like in shock, and Tia's like, I love you. And I was like welling up. I was like, this is so earned. Like, as someone who was a teenage daughter with a mum, like, there's so much here. There's so much weight here to this moment. And it's all, and it is because Tia had to learn a valuable lesson. And the mum said, like, it's going to be different now. It's going to be better now. And it's really quite sweet. And it was because her boyfriend was bound and gagged in Buck's car. Like, it's just a bit funny how they get to that point where she's like, I accept that I've been kind of shitty, and I realize now that I need to respect my parents a bit more. But it is very, very heartwarming, that moment.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely end to the film, and it's nice that actually nothing changed in their relationship. It wasn't a film about Tia and her mum's relationship. It was her mum being away that changed that relationship. I think that's quite interesting. It's Uncle Buck, the man that mum hates and cut out of the wedding pictures and doesn't want him around her children because of this, that, and the other. It's him that fixed the relationship.
Yeah, it is. It's really, that's really heartbreaking, where he's looking through the wedding albums.
Yeah, and he realizes he's cut out.
Been like folded over in all the pictures. It's really quite heartbreaking. And
before that, he had this bit makes me laugh so much when he's sitting on the sofa watching infomercials and stuff. He's eating these crisps and they're all over him, and he just picks up the Hoover and hoovers his chest.
Honestly, I was like, life hack.
Amazing, it's genius.
And when he first enters the house as well, God, I this was so funny. He like picks a decorative plate off the side on the cabinet, and he's like, oh wow, and you know he's gonna drop it. He's like, oh, that's pretty, and he drops it, but it doesn't break, and he picks it up and he turns it over and he goes, oh, unbreakable. So then he slams it against the piano and it shatters into a million pieces, and you're like, for fuck's sake. It was just really funny, and all of the comedy was sort of like that sort of tiptoeing unexpected comedy. And he's got this car that like explodes every time it goes anywhere.
Oh my gosh,
so funny. But yeah, the pancakes that you mentioned earlier, like as soon as they were on screen, I was reminded of them. Like, they're iconic. He's using this like snow shovel like make these pancakes. And Macaulay Culkin's face when he walks in and sees what ends up being like a platter of sausages piled high with these pancakes the size of like a small house, like balloons everywhere, like it's just amazing. And Macaulay Culkin is in like heaven. It's so cute.
I think that's, as a child watching it, that's probably the thing I took away from it. Like, I want giant pancakes on my birthday, Mum, sort it out.
Literally, like, can you imagine? You'd have like not even half of one and you'd be like, I'm done, I'm out.
And that was the best bit of his birthday. He had all those balloons, the pancakes, all the big breakfast. He had a brilliant time. And then the bit that his mum had organised, this clown, because Uncle Buck he says in the dialogue very clearly, like, oh, mum sorted this out, is terrible and an absolute disaster, because he turns up half for a bachelorette party, and that's the ruined bit. So again, it's just John Hughes dropping those, like, Uncle Buck is actually the best thing to ever happen to them.
Definitely.
Brought in.
and like all the kids get a version of that. So Macaulay Culkin's was the clowns, and again, when watching it, John Hughes is so clever at painting such in-depth pictures that I could totally imagine the mom opening the door to that, if she'd have been there, and just sort of accepting it and just being like, oh, well, you know, he's the best in town, so we better have him, and not sort of upsetting the status quo. And again, if she'd been in the meeting with the headmistress about Maisie, she'd have just sort of been like, oh, okay, we'll stop her dreaming and we'll stop her asking questions, kind of thing. Whereas Buck wasn't afraid to, like, shake things up, obviously for the better, and it's really, really well written, and it's really sweet.
It's so grand. It's just I just love John Hughes films, and I think he's so great in what he writes. He's come back around quite nicely with, like, the moral at the end of it. He always writes something that's got a little moral, something to learn from it.
Definitely. And like timeless, like obviously like in a time, but very much timeless in terms of the themes and the characters and the jokes, which is very difficult to do nowadays. Even Disney, who used to be the king and queens of timelessness, are struggling to not get meta and modern with their movies. Whereas John Hughes is always just I mean, all of those sort of 80s family wannabe blockbusters are timeless in that they're just they just appeal to everyone, and they're generally unproblematic and heartwarming. And this
go on, sorry.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say that John Candy, I mean, I see him every year in Home Alone, but I've never really seen him carry a movie before, and he does it so well.
He does it so well. And if you enjoyed Uncle Buck, I would definitely recommend Great Outdoors if you haven't seen it. That's Uncle Buck and it's John Candy and Dan Aykroyd leading it, two very best friends from childhood, two very, very different families, sort of one quite uptight and one quite relaxed, and they go on this summer holiday vacation thing to the great outdoors, and they stay in a cabin, and I mean, John Candy's jet skiing jet skiing. There's really funny, there's a bear, there's raccoons, it's really funny. It's a good John Candy, like, carrying a film again. Aykroyd in that one, that's really good as well if you enjoyed this film.
I do need to see. I've not really entered into that era and that genre of movie. Like, I've never seen Planes, Trains and Automobiles either.
Oh my god, one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Such a weird sense of humor, like, not weird, just like a stupid stuff, like really silly humor is my humor. So that's what I love. Austin Powers, and I love these John Candy things and things like Superbad and Step Brothers, like just silly comedy. So John Candy's perfect for that. And I love 80s films as well. I think that's mostly what I watched growing up in the 90s. Watched a lot of 80s films, so they stick with me.
No, definitely. And this one's, I think everyone's at least heard of Uncle Buck, if not seen it. And as you say, it's on television all the time. Little pre-Home Alone Macaulay Culkin. Like, I think this got him the job in Home Alone. When Shanice, Buck's girlfriend, visits and he's interrogating her through the letterbox, I think John Hughes got the idea from that to then go on to do Home Alone. But no, you're right, it is just like a fun, silly family movie. And family very much so, in that there are mature moments and there are like more adult conversations and themes that are not, they don't talk down to kids, they embrace kids and let them in. And yeah, I like, not to sound old, but like I don't think we get movies like this anymore.
I think that all the time. I think we don't get, I don't know, maybe I'd call them like Sunday afternoon films.
They are Sunday afternoon films.
Aren't
That's
they? Just
exactly
kind of
what they are.
heartwarming, lovely, no issue, like no kind of problematic areas.
Yeah.
And we don't really get so much of that anymore.
No.
And maybe it's because we haven't got the actors to pull that. I don't know. We haven't got a John Candy anymore. There isn't like a lovable uncle kind
There's
of.
got to be somewhere, but I think they're just not getting them work, because I think what it's a case of is Hollywood, you know, Uncle Buck, it may have been based off of this 1930s sitcom, whatever. Fundamentally, it's an original concept. There's no prequel, there's no sequel, there's no franchise. It's a one-off movie that's a vehicle for John Candy, who learns to grow up and is like teaches the children that he's with to grow up as well. And whereas now, if someone was like, I've got this idea for a one-off movie, it's going to be a silly, fun comedy vehicle for a comedian actor, they'd be like, no, thank you.
We can't merchandise that. We can't.
We can't make money off of that.
We can't have a TV series. We can't have a theme park ride. We can't have this. Like, it's
like who's gonna watch that? And they're like, everyone. And they're like, no. Like, maybe we're starting to see it more with animation. Like the Mitchells versus the Machines came to Netflix recently, and that was very, very good, and it felt very family movie. But we don't really get it in live action anymore.
No, there was it Yes Day with Jennifer Garner recently, and that just tanked. Like that just it was straight to Netflix. And that was like this sort of thing, family, fun, not too dramatic, and it just absolutely tanked.
Yeah, I remember seeing the adverts for that, and initially, because a lot of the marketing was around how Jennifer Garner was afraid of roller coasters and goes on a roller coaster in the movie. And I was like, that seems like a fun concept. And then I watched more trailers and I was like, there's nothing wrong with these parents. They're just very sensibly and reasonably keeping their children safe. Like, and yet they're called into the school where these teachers are like, your children hate you. And it's like, at the end of the day, that's none of your business. Like, so I don't let my son launch fireworks off the roof. I think that's quite sensible, actually, from a parental figure point of view. And yet they're instead allowed to have this like day where they say yes to everything. And again, like, is there a budget on that? And I know it's just meant to be a silly concept, but it was harder for me to accept it as an adult. Whereas John Candy as Uncle Buck, Dad's out of town for work. That's established very early on. The parents have a very poor relationship with their children. They forgot when his hockey game was. They forgot when that was. They're not home because they're working all the time. So Tia has to babysit a lot. That's established in the opening scene. And then the dad has a heart attack. So she has to go back to where they've recently just moved from to be with her father during this time of him having a heart attack. And so it's all very reasonable, well thought out reasons as to why this stuff is happening, to allow Uncle Buck to come in and have these family silly hijinks and then learn a heartwarming message at the end. Like, what's the heartwarming message that was taken away from Yes Day? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. That's what then perhaps
let the 14-year-old have fireworks on the roof. Like, no, that's not going to happen. So I'd be interested to watch it just to compare, but you're absolutely right in the sense that I don't think anybody did actually watch it in the end. And even just watching more than one trailer, I was immediately put off it. So yeah, and like, I don't know if it was based on a book or anything, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's and every now and then you get a sort of, there was a King Arthur type movie a few years back, and The House with the Clock in Its Walls with Jack Black and Helen Mirren. But again, it doesn't look like something adult would be able to watch as well, just very sort of aimed at children.
It was the House and the Clock and the Walls had that fantasy element to it.
Yeah.
I'm missing these like realistic portrayal of real life that isn't melodramatic or isn't over the top comedy, or this Uncle Buck. I think it's such a niche genre that we just maybe we've just changed, and this isn't realistic now in 2021 that these things would happen. Perhaps that's what it is. Perhaps we all need fantasy to. Life is so crap. We all need something realistic.
Yeah, and it's you know, John Hughes especially would tap into that very you know, it was always sort of white, middle class, suburban American.
Chicago, one of the kind of most multicultural places, well, not multicultural, but definitely mixed cultural places. Chicago is big black community in Chicago, and all his films are set in Chicago.
Yeah, not in a John Hughes movie. It's funny, isn't it? And I think it's now that people are trying to tell more different stories, I guess, and more different narratives and different walks of life and that sort of thing. That's not to say that this genre shouldn't exist anymore.
The Ewan McGregor, was it The Island? Ewan McGregor and
Scarlett Johansson
that they put all this money into for this original sci-fi movie that's going to do this, that, and then it completely and utterly bombed. I don't think it even made back the money that they spent. And it seems like that was a bit of a turning point in the decline of this original movie making, I feel like. But
definitely, and like it was probably alongside a couple others, because we've had sort of trends and ebbs and flows, and then obviously, well, I mean, 2001 started the superheroes. 2008 Iron Man happened, and it's been cinema's changed.
Marvel and Disney just absolutely control the market, don't they?
Yeah, I'm so bored of them.
Oh my gosh, I stopped watching a long time ago.
I got to Endgame and I was like, the end. And they're like, do you want to watch WandaVision? I'm like, no.
Or Mandalorian, that's the other series.
Yeah. So sick of Star Wars. Like all of these franchises. And it's funny, isn't it, how the sort of marketable, franchisable things from the 80s are coming back.
Yes.
But these sort of movies are getting forgotten. I didn't even realize this was 1989. I was like, oh, it's going to be like 1990 or 91. It just has that feeling, that sort of, and I've not seen it, Mrs. Doubtfire feel.
Oh my God, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh my God, Robin Williams, absolutely class.
Yeah,
he's on his A game in that film. Absolutely genius.
Amazing. I love Jumanji. But again, it took me a few years to watch that. And then they brought back Jumanji.
I've refused to watch it because I love the original.
Yeah, and that's fair.
In my childhood holds a bit of a special place of this wonderful film. And I couldn't watch the remake. As soon as I heard it was going to be a video game and included The Rock, I was like, now
I'm out. That's completely valid. I have to say I quite enjoyed it because it's almost a sequel. Interestingly, they I mean, spoilers for Jumanji.
I did watch the trailer or maybe the first 5 minutes, and I was like, nope, I'm cheating on myself. The game, don't they?
Yeah, the game is washed up and on the beach like it is at the end of the first movie, and somebody picks it up and it sort of lays in this corner of somebody's bedroom, realizes it's not going to get played, so turns itself into like an old console. And then someone is able to get sucked into the video game, so then you're in the world of Jumanji rather than the world of Jumanji coming to you go to the world of Jumanji. And it's, I think, because of that reason, because it's so different, you can separate it from the original and still enjoy the concept. But yeah, I think the sort of likes of Uncle Buck have really sort of died out.
Yeah, it's such a shame. I'm racking my brain trying to think, has there been anything in this sort of similar sort of vein? Because the whole family member kind of maybe rejected family member coming in to the family to babysit. That's quite a used story, isn't it? We get that quite a lot in stuff.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that's warmed my heart recently.
Yeah. And like something that you never get these days, I love this movie is an hour and 40 minutes and you learn everything you need to learn in the first 10 minutes and it's all wrapped up neatly and it doesn't talk down to you and it's just efficient storytelling. And I'm so sick now of movies being like 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long when they don't need to be. Because as I say, we learn everything we needed to learn from those characters in the first 7 minutes of the movie. And nowadays you have movies where you learn nothing about the characters and they've been on screen for 40 minutes and you're like, oh, why do I care?
We were going to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood years ago, and I love Tarantino and I love Leo. Oh my God, in a very different and I was very, very excited. And I just remember coming out just being like, I don't think anything happened.
Yeah.
We were in there for nearly 3 hours and I couldn't tell you what the film was about. Yeah. I know Sharon Tate, the murder is kind of the running under storyline, but I genuinely couldn't tell you what just happened. It just felt like nearly 3 hours of Leo and Brad being Leo and Brad, and that was it.
Yeah,
nothing particularly happened.
It's so funny.
I like like you were just saying, the idea of this Uncle Buck being a compact storytelling experience. It's neat. We get all that exposition in 7 minutes. We know everything, and it's wound up nicely at the end. No cliffhanger. Hang around for film number 2 we're making next month. Like Ghostbusters, we're going to make another one as soon as we've finished filming this one. None of that kind of
bullshit
need to drag anything on. It's all just wound up, and that's what a film should be, isn't it? It's supposed to be hour and 40 minutes, hour and a half of escapism, and it should all be wound up. You should be able to kind of finish watching the film and be like, that was sad, that was lovely.
Yeah, literally. It just
wound up emotion and move on with your life.
I miss movies being short.
I do. I miss my son. He's only 18 months old, but he absolutely loves Moana.
Oh,
and it's wonderful. I don't mind watching it twice a day. It's wonderful. And we get to the point where they're sort of about to attack Tekar or whatever it is at the end. And I'm like, it's only been on 10 minutes, it's nearly finished. Like, it's a really nicely kind of short, wound up film. Done. Lovely.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Exactly. I think there should be a law in Hollywood. If the screenplay comes through and it's longer than an hour and 45 minutes, you need to come in and justify why it needs to be that long.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or we are so back to it, because no one has got 3 hours to sit around watching a film anymore. We're all very busy.
No, exactly. Unless like you're condensing War and Peace, like you need to give me a bloody good reason as to why this goes over the hour 45 mark. Like,
it's just indulgent otherwise. That's what I felt about Leo and Brad. I was like, I feel like this is just indulgent for you.
Yeah.
Like, you're just gassing off your acting chops for 3 hours to absolutely no resolution. Like, nothing has come from this.
Literally. But yeah, anything else to say about Uncle Buck?
I'm really glad I picked it. I know you asked for a couple and I sent you loads, but I'm really glad we went with this one, because it's just, and I really loved watching it again, kind of in prep for coming on. It's just it just makes me laugh, and that's all I really look for in a film. I don't really watch horrors or anything, thrillers sometimes, but I just want something that makes me laugh, and this is top 5 make me laugh films.
Yeah, it's so sweet, it's so charming, and it's so easygoing, and it's, you could stick it on in the background or you can stick it on a Sunday afternoon, You can show it to everyone. Like, it's just great.
Yeah, timeless. I'm a big 80s film fan, so bring back the 80s.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Why This Film. Bye.